Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you again this week with Mrs. Q Live. I'm still at my sister's house in Albany, and please feel free to say hi in the chat wherever you are. It's great to see everyone. It looks like I froze for a second here. I'm not sure what's happening. Let me just look. Hi, my picture looks like I'm frozen. Let me reload this page. Hmm. Oh, now it looks good. Now it looks good. So who knows? Technology is a strange thing, isn't it? Um, just going to take a look and make sure it looks good to you. I think it looks good to you as well. Anyway, if this does stop streaming, someone, send me a little note telling me that it stopped. I generally have good internet here, even though I'm in the country. Oh, we have a whole bunch of people tonight. It looks good. Thank you, Mr. White. So you can see we're still casual. We're still here upstate in Albany, New York, at my sister, Mrs. Van R's home. And I do say it is May 8th, and this is the coldest May 8th I think I can remember. I do have a blanket here somewhere that I have to put over my shoulders if I get cold while we're talking. And it's been a very cold May so far, which is a little bit puzzling. I didn't bring that many warm clothes up here with me, but my sister has plenty to share. And if you remember last week, I mentioned that we were here. Fix my bonnet a little bit, make it look a little bit better. There we go. You can see my face a little bit. I don't I don't really need to hide from you. I don't think you all know me well enough that I don't need to hide anything about myself anymore. We've been friends for so long now. So we came up here, as I mentioned, first to get away from the city because since the news of Lexington and Concord, things in New York have been unpredictable and chaotic. And Mr. Q thought it was a good idea to get out of town for a few days, which is nice. It's turned out to be more than a few days, but also I mentioned that Mr. Q was a part of a delegation going to speak to his Iroquois friends about remaining neutral in what looks like it's going to be a war between America and England, and specifically to talk to his friend Joseph Brant, the chief of the Mohawk people. And I spoke a little bit last week about the relationship between the Mohawk and colonists and who everyone is. And Mr. Q has returned from his trip and right now is downstairs with Mr. Van R, my brother-in-law, in a state of utter despondency because he says that he truly believes that his good friend, Chief Brant, will likely side with the British in this upcoming conflict. And he's rather depressed and despondent about that. But if you know Mr. Q, you know where his loyalties lie, and that his loyalties do lie with the colonies here in America. And we were sitting out in the garden earlier, and he looked at me very quietly and he said, Mrs. Q, I hope it doesn't come to it, but if I am required to stand on the opposite side of a field from my friend Chief Brant, I will surely shoot him first, which was very upsetting for Mr. Q to say. But it's important, I think, for all of you to realize and understand how important this is to all of us here, our fight with England, as it seems it's going to be for our independence from British rule. So just a little bit about what is going on with Mr. Q. And I'm going to go back to the chat here, rearranging things here so I can see them a little bit better. Now you notice I have here, the front page is from The Pilgrim's Progress by Mr. John Bunyan. And the reason I have this here for us tonight is that Mrs. Van R and I were going through, some of our girlhood things, and we came across the copy of this that we had when we were girls and learning to read. Now, in our time, many children learned to read by reading the home Bible or by reading sermons or by reading something like The Pilgrim's Progress. Who says, I need one of those hats. Oh, thank you. Rightful Liberty says, I look marvelous. Thank you so much. It's the country air. Being out in the country has been good for me. And I'll tell you all a secret that I am about four shades darker than what you're seeing tonight, but with the miracle of modern makeup, I'm able to make myself appear light enough to pass as a colonial lady and not a servant, although you can see I'm getting a little bit dark here. Thank goodness for modern makeup so that I can still go out in the garden and still appear as a fine lady from the 18th century with at least as fair skin as I can give myself without looking fake. So Mrs. Van R and I were discussing that our tutor, Mr. Crane, had us read The Pilgrim's Progress when we were girls, not only as a reading exercise, but of course, as a moral exercise and an exercise in growing up and learning to deal with various life's difficulties. And Mr. Bunyan, if you don't know, was a very interesting man who lived in the 1660s in England and was jailed in England for preaching the Christian gospel in a way that was unacceptable to the Church of England. In other words, he was preaching in a non-approved manner. And while he was in prison, he wrote a little book about his life called Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners, which is a biography of him and how he came to know the Lord Jesus and become saved and all of the difficulties he faced. He wrote that while he was in prison. After being released from prison, he wrote The Pilgrim's Progress. And many of us read The Pilgrim's Progress growing up. There are many great moral lessons to be found here. Now, interesting, I don't know if you're aware, but about, let's see, it's 1775, so about 60 years ago here in New York, two Presbyterian pastors were jailed by the governor, Lord Cornbury, the second Viscount, second Viscount, oh, Cornbury was Viscount of what? I can't even recall anymore. Anyway, Governor Lord Cornbury jailed two Presbyterian pastors who were preaching in a home not far from my home in New York. It was a home on Pearl Street in the summer with the windows open. And because the windows were open, the message could be heard publicly. Well, Governor Cornbury declared that this was preaching without the approved license from the crown, because if you were not the Church of England, you needed a license to preach. And although the gentleman had licenses from Virginia, Lord Cornbury declared them illegal in New York, and the pastors were jailed. They were tried and they were found not guilty because, after all, this is New York, where we do like people to have freedom. And both pastors were found not guilty, and they continued being able to preach without that required license. And this was the beginning of freedom of religious expression in New York. So that would be many years after John Bunyan that we see people here in the colonies even being persecuted for their religious beliefs. Now, the book The Pilgrim's Progress was great fun to read when we were girls and taught us all sorts of interesting moral lessons. And Mrs. Van R and I were talking about them yesterday and having a good time, reminiscing about the lessons on, especially her favorite was the one on vanity. I know this sounds ironic that Mrs. Van R would have been affected by the story on vanity and acquiring material goods in order to find your self-worth, and that we would sit in a parlor that looks like this while we would be speaking of such a thing. I know it seems ironic and doesn't seem to make sense, but I assure you, Mrs. Van R is a very generous and kind person and not vain at all. And just simply has the wealth to do this, and also has the wealth to be very generous in giving away quite a lot of the Van R money to the poor and other needy organizations. So this really isn't a view of her vanity as much as it's just lifestyle here where she is. But she talked about how much that chapter on vanity and acquiring commercial goods or material items to define who you are, how much that really affected her and made her very conscious of all of that, in spite of the great wealth that she has today. And we also talked about the one where the character Christian has to deal with being despondent and being depressed and believing that the things you did in the past that were bad will be carried on your shoulders forever, and that you can never get away from them. You can never better yourselves from them, and that that isn't true, and that you should understand those things that you did and discard them and move forward to be a better and more virtuous person. And so we had a very good time talking about our girlhood, growing up and reading this with our very eccentric tutor, Mr. Crane. Mr. Crane also used to take us on field trips, right? He would take the girls, some of the other girls he taught, on field trips to the local cemetery, where our reading exercise was to read the inscriptions on the gravestones. And our math exercise was to figure out how old the people were by subtracting their birth date from their death date on the stone. So that was his idea of an active lesson in reading and mathematics, and we all used to go out and giggle and laugh. But looking back on it, it wasn't a bad exercise, and that we also, as we walked through the graveyard, talked about who the people were and who their families were and what their contribution to the community was. So it was kind of a social class in community and community history. It helped improve our reading. We also were asked to identify if there were any Bible verses on the stones, to identify those Bible verses, and to, I said, also do the math involved in determining how old the person was, how long they lived. Oh, Mrs. Healy is here. Hello, Mrs. Healy, and hello to Mr. Healy. And so Mr. Crane would take us on little trips like that to the local graveyard, where we would practice our reading and mathematics that way. But this is a very common book that people have in their homes. And I think I've mentioned before that many people can't afford to have books. So they might have a copy of this handed down through generations. This copy that I'm showing you here was published in 1695, and so has been handed down for quite a long time. I'm not sure how it came into our parents' home, and that my family wasn't here yet in 1695, but perhaps my parents all bought it from someone or found it in a shop or someone gave it to them. I'm not sure how they got it. I will give Mr. Q your best, Mrs. Healy, of course. Um, um, Mr. McGregor, I think it's Mr. I need to put on my glasses, excuse me. It's age. McGregor says, God bless us. God bless you as well. So many people have a copy of this that they might read from. Sermons are popular as well. You can go to the shops and you can buy copies of your favorite pastor's sermons. So for instance, in New York, the Anglican pastors at Trinity Church, some of those are popular. Um, Mr. Moody's pastor at St. Paul's Chapel, his are popular, or some from the Presbyterian Church. So families might read old sermons together, or of course, would read their Bible together. And those may be the only reading materials a family has. Also, I've mentioned that many families don't have the leisure time to read. Often there's only one person in the family who can read, and they'll read maybe from a book like this, or they'll read from the Bible in their study together. I should mention that the Presbyterian community does encourage literacy, because they would like everyone to be able to read along in the Bible when they go to church, and to read those verses at home and discuss them. So the Presbyterian community encourages literacy in their families. Oh, Mr. White would like to know if I have read any of Pastor Lawrence Stern's works, the sermons of Mr. Yorick, the life and opinions of Tristram. Oh, Tristram Shandy, of course. Gentleman or Sentimental Journey. I'm not familiar with the others, but of course, Tristram Shandy I have. My dog Rex is with us tonight. It's always great to see you, Rex. Thank you for joining us. So no, I have not read a lot of those, but yes, indeed, Tristram Shandy I am familiar with. So John Bunyan being very popular now, I know I'm not supposed to talk about the future, but I have mentioned in the past that I believe Mr. Q himself might be a time traveler, as he has shown up in our home at times with very odd items that look that they might be from different time periods. Now, Mr. Q brought me a book, and I don't have my copy here in Albany with me, published 100 years from now in 1868 by a Massachusetts lady named Louisa May Alcott. It's a book called Little Women. And in it, the four March sisters are reading The Pilgrim's Progress, 200 years after Mr. Bunyan wrote it. So you can see this maintained for a very long time as a classic for family reading and for children learning how to navigate difficulties in life, how to navigate people who lie, how to navigate different temptations, different weaknesses, self-doubt, pride, vanity. I can't say it because the book is not out yet, but coming out later this century will be an excellent book called Vanity Fair, which if you have not read, you should think about reading. Also, based on the place in The Pilgrim's Progress called Vanity Fair. So you can see Mr. Bunyan really is going to plant seeds that are going to affect literature far into the future with his work, which is very good. And I think you should read this if you have not read it. It is not that difficult to read. As I said, we read it as girls and very much enjoyed it. So we've been going through the old trunks and drawers here and looking at things from our girlhood and talking about growing up and what it was like. And Mrs. Van R talking about now her role as a great lady here versus her girlhood. And she says that sometimes she wishes that she could give her own daughter the type of free upbringing that we had in the country because, there are higher expectations on her daughters because of the role that she inhabits here. And some very interesting things we were talking about. She also confessed to me that she always wished that she had been the one to go to New York and run the shop for our father. And that at first she was disappointed in simply becoming what she considered to be a wife and a homemaker, but she's found a great deal of joy in being a wife to Mr. Van R. And she finds it very challenging, she said, running a household as large as this. So if you don't know, a lady like Mrs. Van R. Will often keep all of the financial records for the home. So she tracks all of Mr. Van R's income and all their income from their various farming and business interests. She's also responsible for making sure that everyone that works for the family is properly paid. She makes sure that any servants are paid, that they have good living quarters, that they have everything they need. She makes sure everyone in the family has all of their needs met. So that would be, of course, making sure at the end of the harvest time that all foods are prepared and put away for the winter, that everyone has appropriate clothing and gear for the winter months, which are terrible up here. Making sure also that everyone has all sorts of any types of medicines or cures or anything else they may need for the winter months as it's hard to get out. And then also making sure in the summer that the fields are kept, the gardens are kept, making sure that everything runs. Mrs. Van R, it's like managing a business for her, similar to the business that I run in New York. So we both in our own ways have become managers of other people and making sure that events happen as they're required to happen so that all things run easily and without trouble. So in that way, we are very similar, although she also did tell me that she just would love, she said, one day to come down and come with me when I board the ships and speak to the captains who are bringing back goods for my shop. She says that she says that she would have to dress in disguise because a lady of her stature could never be seen walking the deck of such a ship or being seen on those docks, talking to such gentlemen, if they could be called gentlemen. So Mrs. Van R is quite impressed or intrigued with my relationship with the very ship captains who carry goods into the port who are bound for my store. Our father only allowed me to accompany him. He was not interested in having my mother or my sister there. Another irony of my family in that he said it wasn't a place for ladies. Except that we would see Mrs. Alexander there all the time, wouldn't we? And I assure you that when Mrs. Alexander boarded a ship, she received the utmost respect of every man on the ship, and especially the captain, who was working for her. So I learned a great deal from her about how to conduct myself. But Mrs. Van R apparently has all sorts of secret fantasies about coming down to visit me by herself and um, seeing some of the, let's say, less ladylike parts of the city. Although she thinks I have ever seen some of them, there are parts of the city, I assure you, that I have never seen. And it is my honest wish that Mr. Q has never seen either, although I don't know if he would even admit to me if he had. Maybe that's something I really don't want to know. Now, getting back to Mr. John Bunyan and religious persecution, some of you might not know that even in my time, in various colonies, there still is extreme religious persecution, and that there are religious denominations that are outlawed in some colonies. So we are not all one group of colonies in many ways, which of course has many people concerned that since we have now been attacked by England and Massachusetts, that it may be very difficult for us to come together as one and fight England, as we are different culturally. We are different in many ways. The people who inhabit us can come from different places, and we have religious rivalries. So to give you an example, we have our friends in Massachusetts. My father, Mr. C, taught both Mrs. Van R and I to be very careful when speaking critically of anyone or anything. And if we could not take care in our criticism to say nothing. But I feel I must speak about Massachusetts to at least some without being insulting or too critical. Except I do have to tell you that New Yorkers laugh at Massachusetts all the time prior to the problems that they had. You know, we viewed Massachusetts and the Bostonians particularly as very provincial people, very narrow-minded people, very intolerant people, and people who believe in their moral superiority to all the rest of us, which I don't think has changed as a result of them being attacked a couple of weeks ago. And because they are viewed that way, I will predict that when the Second Continental Congress meets, I think in 2 days, today is May 8th, I think, they're scheduled to meet in Philadelphia on the 10th. I predict it will be very difficult for the Second Congress to find any unanimity in support of Massachusetts because of the difficulty of dealing with the people, especially in the Boston area. I predict that some of the colonies are going to say that the problem the Bostonians are experiencing is not their problem, that they are still in good, good relationship with England, and that whatever is happening in Boston is the fault of the Bostonians because we all know how they are. Now, in New York, we had a group of people to settle in the late 1600s along the Hudson Valley, a group of settlers led by a woman named Anne Hutchinson. Anne Hutchinson was from Massachusetts and was expelled by the Puritans, Congregationalists, for not adhering to their strict religious doctrines. They were expelled from Massachusetts and they settled in the Hudson Valley. They were, I'm trying to get my years right, that is so long ago. This is under Governor Kieft, so that is before Governor Stuyvesant. Oh my goodness, my history. If only Mr. Crane could see me now, he would be so disappointed at my lack of remembering my dates. But sometime during the reign of Governor William Kieft, and so I'm thinking the 1640s or 50s, perhaps, just before England, William Kieft, in order to cover up his incompetence in managing the Dutch colony that we were, New Netherland, began a war with the Algonquin Lenape people. As a result of this war, Mrs. Hutchinson and her group in the Hudson Valley were all killed during this war. So just some background at that time about and Hutchinson and her followers being expelled from Massachusetts, and then sadly, all of them killed during the conflict that occurred between the Lenape and Governor William Kieft. William the Testy, oh, William Kieft. Um, William Kieft, let me tell you, people who are incompetent in their roles always do the same things to cover for their incompetence, and that is redirect you from their failures to being angry, hateful of someone else. And this is what William Kieft did by slaughtering a settlement of Lenape during the night, men, women, and children, and then provoking them to attack back, and then trying to get everyone into a war with the Lenape. Gratefully, the Lenape leaders and the other leaders of New Amsterdam figured this out very quickly, met, smoked a peace pipe, came to a peaceful agreement, and things quieted down in what is now the city of New York. Unfortunately, went on a while longer in the Hudson Valley. And then I think that the other people who were running New Netherland at the time put Kieft on a ship and sailed him out. And I'm not even sure where he wound up. I don't know if he ever got back to Amsterdam at all. He certainly deserved the fate he got. I have a message here from Rightful Liberty who says, I was in Gotham yesterday enjoying pasta and meatballs with client at Carmine's near Times Square. Thought of you and your wonderful experiences in Manhattan. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. The future me has spent many a night at Carmine's in Times Square. So that was wonderful that you did that. And pasta and meatballs, that sounds like an interesting dish from the future, doesn't it? So I'm glad you had a great time and that you thought of me while you were there. That makes me feel great that you're there and you think of me. I don't know when I'm going to go back. Well, my Mrs. Q character, we are returning to New York this weekend, and I hope that it will be in better condition than when we left, and that things will have quieted down a bit over the situation in Boston, but I'm not going to be too hopeful, of that happening. So Massachusetts, of course, is intolerant. They don't like anyone who's different. They expel people who are different, and they look down on the rest of us from some sort of heights of moral superiority. Did they have pasta in my time? Not as you know it in your time. That is a later type of food invention, although we do have various types of breads that we eat, but not pasta the way you know it in your time. But I tell you, in the current time period, in your time period, I make my own pasta for Mr. Q and me, which is something I grew up doing in my family. So something I enjoy doing very much. In the 18th century, though, this Mrs. Q is not known for my cooking talents. And I am hoping, by the way, I have a friend now who is traveling in Paris. And when she returns, I am hoping to get some cooking lessons from her and perhaps share them with you during a live video. So we'll be talking about that when she returns from her trip from Paris. Greetings from Arizona. Where is Arizona? That must be a state I don't know about yet. Perhaps out in the Western Territory somewhere. Excuse me. So Massachusetts expels everyone that doesn't get along with them, and then looks down on the rest of us from some type of heights of moral superiority. So people have very harsh feelings about Massachusetts. Now, in New York, although we have many religious denominations in New York, we do ban one of those, and the one that is banned is Catholicism. Oh, Mr. White tells me that Arizona is in New Spain. Oh, an area that Mr. Q might be familiar with. And thank you, Mr. White. In New York, we don't allow the practice of Catholicism, or as it is called, popery. Now, many of you might think that is odd, since my parents are from Naples, which is a part of the Holy Roman Empire. It's a part of the seat of the Holy Roman Empire. And Mr. Q's family, of course, is from Spain. also a Catholic country. Neither of our families, by the way, are practicing Catholics. New York doesn't allow Catholicism for a number of reasons. The first is that we are filled with people who came to the colonies escaping Catholic oppression. For instance, our friends, the Mesereaus in Staten Island, are French Huguenots who left France escaping Catholic persecution. I don't know how familiar you are with the approximately 600 years of Catholic oppression that existed in Europe, where in many places, particularly France, people were forced to either convert to Catholicism or they were jailed or killed. So many people left during that time to come to America, or right at the end of that period of time in the 1600s to come to America to freely practice other religions. So New York is full of religions that were persecuted by the Catholic Church and also persecuted by, I think since I'm all the way out here in Albany and there's nothing happening here, and I'm sure nobody's listening in, also persecuted by the Church of England, as Mr. John Bunyan was. So we also have that, although in New York, the official church is the Church of England, but is only 17% of our population. A little bit larger than the Church of England is our Presbyterian community, which of course left because of persecution, the Church of England. Many of them are from Scotland, as you may know, or are Scotch-Irish. Some are English as well. We also in New York, especially here where my sister is, Mrs. Van R., who's married into a Dutch family, have Dutch Reformed, who are also, of course, rivals of the Church of England. And generally what we see is a union between the Presbyterians and the Dutch Reformed here against the Church of England when it comes to various types of political matters here in the colony. But we also have many other religions in New York. We have Baptists, we have Methodists, we have Moravians, we have Quakers, we even have some Jews who left Brazil when the Portuguese arrived in Brazil. The Portuguese, of course, being Catholics, the Jewish people then afraid to stay, sailed to the northern colonies here, and were welcomed by the people of New Amsterdam. So we also have Jewish congregation in New York. So we have many people in New York who are here escaping the two big churches on the other side of the Atlantic, the Church of England and Catholicism. Both are considered by people in New York to be political religions, where the religion is also the law. And it is believed here in New York that Catholics will be better inclined to follow the Pope than to follow the law or the common law or the governor. And that is looked very much down upon in New York and is seen as very how shall I say it, unacceptable, that we believe here in the rule of law, that the only way we can all of us live here from so many different places with so many different backgrounds and languages and beliefs is for all of us to be the same under the law. And the fear is that the Catholic Church and the people in the Catholic Church will put the church above the law and not consider themselves to be subject to the same rules under the law. For example, one of the things, for example, that people here are very conflicted about is that the Catholic priests are, as my father explained to me, cannot turn in someone who confesses a crime to them. So as my father explained, if someone is a murderer and confesses his crime or her crime to a priest, the priest cannot go and turn in the person who murdered someone. And then that person may be able to go on and murder another person. And the priest would have no liability for that, for doing that, which my father thinks and taught us was wrong, that places the priest above the law, and the priest cannot be sued civilly or be held criminally liable for any subsequent death that might occur. So those are the types of things my father taught us as being the reason Catholics are treated so suspiciously, and that a Catholic church is not allowed to be formed in the state of New York. Now, if you're in Maryland, it's a very different thing. Maryland has a large population of Catholics, and I think I wrote it down here before we came on tonight. Let me just put my glasses on and find it. I did jot down some numbers for us. So in Maryland, Roman Catholics are about 15% of the population there, with Episcopal or the Church of England being the next biggest, and them being, very similar in their beliefs, except of course one being headed by the king and the other by the Pope. So Maryland has a very large population of Catholics, whereas other states, do not. And it all depends. I think New York, I'm looking here, just looking at the numbers I wrote for us. New York has the lowest percentage, but New York also has, and Pennsylvania, have very high percentages of other types of denominations that aren't big enough to be listed on here. And the ones I jotted down for us are Congregationalists, which are the biggest, of course, in New England, Presbyterians, which are very big in New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and somewhat in Maryland. Baptist, which is a little smaller but very large in New Jersey, Episcopal, which is the Church of England, and interestingly is very low in our neighboring state, Pennsylvania. That is interesting. Pennsylvania having a very large number of Presbyterians, Quakers, of course, which Pennsylvania is known for, German Reformed, Lutherans, and Dutch Reformed, and very low Episcopal. So we're all mixed up here in the colonies with very different religions throughout our different colonies. Virginia is very high with Presbyterians, Baptists, and Episcopals, and very low in others, just a handful of Quakers and almost no other religions. Same with North Carolina. Oh, North Carolina has quite a few Quakers. South Carolina and Georgia has quite a lot of Lutherans. And so we see this interesting distribution, religious distribution, throughout the colonies of different religions being welcomed or frowned upon. Pennsylvania, I think, may be the freest colony when it comes to religious worship, with New York being next. So just some of the thinking of our time. Most people believe in free religious practice here in America for all of the religions that were fleeing the oppression of Catholicism and the Church of England. And these, of course, would all be Christian religions. And I'm not sure, besides New York, who else welcomes Jewish congregations. Let me see if I have a little. I don't think I took a note of that because the number is just so small. Oh, here we go. This year, there are only 5 Jewish synagogues in all of the colonies. There are 56 Catholic churches in the colonies. To give you an idea, there are 668 congregational, 588 Presbyterian, 497 Baptist, and that's all larger than the Church of England, of which there are 495. And then there are Quaker, German Reformed, Lutheran, Dutch Reformed, Methodist, and other Protestants. So very interesting distribution of religious belief here throughout the colonies. But with people of many different, I think, backgrounds and beliefs, The Pilgrim's Progress is still a popular book because it is a wonderful guideline for children and adults learning how to deal with various difficulties that lie on the road of life, whether or not you are a believer and that this is the Christian's path to being saved and to heaven, or whether you believe it is a great story about how to deal with adversity in life. Either way, it's one of the books we find most often in 18th century American homes. The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. So I hope you enjoyed our little talk. Oh, we have something here from Rightful Liberty. Maryland allowed horse racing. The first jockey club in 1743. Well, isn't that interesting that Maryland allows horse racing? That's something I don't know, although I do think if I asked Mr. Q, I bet that he would know, as he tends to know all sorts of um, odd facts about various parts of our continent as he's traveled through so much of it in his lifetime. I am sorry that Mr. Q is feeling so bad about the possibilities of our future and his future partying with his good friend, Chief Brand, and his other friends in the Indian nations who he has known since he, was very young, 14 or 15 years old. Unfortunately, this is what war brings to all people, and we have no idea what that is going to cause to happen here to us. So in the meantime, it might not be a very bad idea to pull out one's Pilgrim's Progress and read through it as a guide for getting through the coming difficult times. Or if you are a believer, to perhaps get out your Bible and read some of that for guidance, or to seek some counseling from your local pastor, because I assume things are going to get very difficult for us here in the American colonies, and I cannot imagine what we are going to find when we get back to New York. I don't know even if I'll be able to reopen my shop. I certainly hope I will. What is it? It's May 8th. I am sure that the debate is still happening there over whether or not the ships supplying the troops in Boston ought to be outfitted by the merchants in New York. So, oh, I am I am dreading that I might walk right into the midst of that argument when I get home. T and Wildfire says, thank you, Mrs. Q. I so enjoy listening to you. Thank you for joining me. And I hope you all have a lovely week. And I will be back next week from Hanover Square. And I just might have a new outfit, as since we are now entering into the non-importation, non-exportation, non-consumption agreement with England, I will have to be wearing homespun clothes. So I will very likely have some clothing made out of local fabric to show you, rather than the more fashionable clothes I'm used to wearing, as I don't want to appear in anything fashionable and have anyone throw, any rotten food at me in the street for wearing such clothes. Um, LA Girl 88 says, thank you. Thank you all very much. Looking forward to seeing you again next Thursday. Have a wonderful week, and I hope it's warmer here in the next few days. So bye. Good night, everyone. And oh, Mr. White, before we go, Mr. Q and I have been wondering if we can get in touch with you, if we may get in touch with you, as we are interested in you perhaps taking us on a tour of your town of Easton, Pennsylvania. And I will find a way to speak with you some more about that. We would like very much to come to Easton and visit you. So until next time, everyone have a lovely week, and I'll see you next Thursday from Hanover Square.